Hi, thank you for tuning into the Short Stacks. I'm Lisa Quintero, young adult librarian.
And I am Nick Barron, patron and sometimes volunteer.
This is a show where we talk to you about what we've been reading, listening to, or watching. But first,
Library news.
so we have quite a few events coming up in the next couple of weeks. On Tuesday, April 13th, we have Family Fun Night to Go. Wednesday, we have Art Cart to Go, and those continue through the end of the month. On Thursday, April 15th, we have Storytime Online. On, let's see, Thursday, April 15th, we also have the AM Book Club with Haley, and Nick will tell us what the title is.
The Chelsea Girls by Fiona Davis.
And then on Saturday, April 17th, we have a program called Music, Movement, and More. On April 20th, which is a Tuesday, we have another Rhyme Time Tuesday. And on the 21st, once again, there's Art Cart. On the 23rd, which is a Friday, there's a grown up take and make kit. And that I believe they're making bird feeders, like little like suet kind of bird feeders.
Yeah, it says pick up a kit to make your own bird feeding seed cakes.
There you go. And then on the 27th, there's the Shorewood Architecture Reflects Village History, the Building of Shorewood. So all these are virtual and they are available on Zoom. So you can go ahead and go to our calendar, and on the calendar, you'll find the links for all of the different events. The music movement and more requires registration. So if you are interested in that one, be sure you register through the calendar. All of the rest of them are just pop-in events or take and make kits.
Architecture stuff is always interesting. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, yeah, no, we actually have a display of architecture books right now about Sherwood and Milwaukee right next to the reference desk, and I was looking through some of them, and they're really neat. So I'm curious about that one. Might pop in for it myself, and maybe you can join me if you like. So that's what we've got coming up. We are slowly, easing back into having things transition back to pre-COVID times. We have all of our catalog computers are open now, and we are, slowly easing back into things. So hopefully in the next few weeks you'll see some positive changes. All right, so let's go on to
From the stacks.
so Nick and I said we were going to do a genre dive, and I assigned Nick the task of reading a mystery novel, and he assigned me the task of listening to Trip Hop. So I'll let him go first, and he can talk to us a little about what he picked. And my parameters around this, because there's when you give somebody something like read a mystery novel, there are literally thousands of mystery novels, and he was like, "All right, give me some parameters." And so my parameters were that it had to be written by a person of color or a woman, and, those are pretty much my only parameters that I gave him, so he still had a lot to pick from.
And
Um,
I narrowed it down myself by going with both.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I did a Google search to I typed in I think it was black female mystery author just to see what would come up, and the first name that came up was Barbara Ann Neely.
Mhm,
And I looked over what her history of writing was like, and I was like, oh, this person sounds interesting. So I'm going to start at the beginning, because she's written, or she had written, four different books about a character by the name of Blanche White.
okay.
And so I decided to go with the first one, Blanche on the Lamb, having really, other than the fact that Barbara Neely had kind of like she was a fan of Toni Morrison, and that she had an interest in activism that would shine through in her writing, or that's what they said. And so I was like,
Mhm,
okay, I'm gonna dig a little deeper.
cool. Also,
And so,
you listened to this, on Hoopla?
hoopla.
Hoopla, okay. And then just so listeners know as well, we have Blanche on the Lamb here at Shorewood in paperback, but it appears to be the only Barbara Neely book that we have in Shorewood. All the other ones are available in book format through other libraries, so you can come in and request them as well. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
Keep
no,
keep going on.
all important information.
Yes.
So yeah, so I started this book because I move slow, notoriously slow. I ended up having to check it out on Hoopla three separate times.
Okay.
Yeah,
It took you like
so
3 months, yeah.
it took me 3 months to listen to 8 hours of speaking. But actually, that makes it sound like is a struggle, but I listen to so many other things that I get distracted.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
but
and, like, the reason that I assigned it to you is I know that you're not somebody who reads a lot of mysteries necessarily, and, I kinda wanted your take on it as somebody who is not into that, and so, like, I know that had it been one of your genres, you probably would have gotten through it a little bit faster, but, sometimes it takes a little bit longer when we're listening to things that aren't necessarily what motivates us to read, but
no, this is true. But yeah, it was a very, very interesting book because I look at storytelling through a role playing game lens. There are certain things that I understand about mysteries that are taken from role playing games,
Mhm,
like getting people into the mystery right away. And so at first, the thing about Blanche on the Lamb, I really liked how this book set up Blanche as a character.
mhm,
Um, but I expected the mystery element to jump in a lot quicker.
mhm,
It was at least 2 to 2.5 hours before the mystery got set up. But
okay,
to give a brief overview, Blanche is on the lam because she actually goes to the book starts off with her going to court because of an unpaid bill. And because of this unpaid bill, they are going to sentence her to like a month in jail. And she doesn't want to go to jail because she's got kids, and though she's got her mom can take care of the kids, she doesn't want to be separated from her kids. And it's all so stupid because it's over a bill.
mhm,
And it's a bill that she could that if there was just one more day, the bill would have gotten paid.
mhm,
Um, so it's this very, very like kind of like frustrating setup.
mhm,
And it's not in a big city, and there is a bunch of commotion in the courthouse, and she makes a split second decision to flee. And so she was in the ladies' room. She comes out of the ladies' room. There's all sorts of commotion going on in the courthouse show. So she decides to slip out the back door. And then
mhm,
she's like, what am I going to do? And she's a cleaning lady by trade. And she usually works independent, but um, she does have a connection with a cleaning service, and the cleaning service had offered her a job for that day, and she had turned it down. But while she was fleeing, and it gives you the tension. She's running through the streets, and because there was commotion at the courthouse. There's cop cars zipping by, and so she's like in a panic, and she's running through the streets, and she ultimately ends up in a neighborhood that she would not normally be in,
mhm,
wealthy white neighborhood. And she realizes that she's right near the address of the work that she had been offered by the cleaning service. So she ends up deciding to show up like she had taken the job, and just walk in. And if for some reason the person that they replaced her with was there, she'd be like, oh, my mistake, and then she was going to leave because
uh-huh,
they mapped that out. But the person hadn't shown up. The cleaning service had left this rich family hanging, and so they bring her in, and get her straight to work.
mhm,
And it is through they hired this person to work for an entire week. And so Blanche, she doesn't like know the details of the job, or what's expected or anything, and she's just kind of like faking it until she makes it all the way through.
mhm,
And she finds out that she's going to be there for a day. They start introducing the characters of the house. And then after a day or two, the action moves to another like summer home.
okay,
And so it's taking her further away from the city and into the country. It makes it much harder for her to step away from the situation.
mhm,
And so, as it turns out, she starts to. One of the things that Barbara Neely does a really good job of is setting up the sense of one, what the black experience and the black perspective is like in these circumstances. And usually when you're looking at like a whodunit type mystery, usually the help is one of the they all have a reason to kill the rich person. Um, and then there's usually a bunch of family that are also like, they want the money or they want this, and
Yeah,
so they
like the movie Knives Out.
yes. So or I was thinking of like Clue or
Yes. Which is
but
basically the movie Knives Out.
yeah. So usually that's kind of the perspective. Um, but one of the things that Barbara Neely really kind of focuses on is the invisibility of people of color, poor people, and people with disabilities.
Mhm,
And yeah, so she focuses really heavily on that aspect and how Blanche is when you constantly are stepping outside of your comfort zone to work in the comfort zone of others. There's like certain survival mechanisms, like
mhm,
ways that you behave and ways that you act in order to survive in white society, especially upper class white society versus your family at home. And so, but also how you are treated as invisible and kind of disposable and all of those aspects. And it is because of that invisibility and her just natural observation skills, she starts
mhm,
to pick up that there is something untoward happening in this house and between the members of this family. There's just something that's not right. The man of the house, he's just constantly, kind of like agitated and frustrated. There's a disabled, not disabled. What's the word I'm looking for? He's got like a high functioning Down syndrome. Um, so he's technically a person with disabilities, but he's
mhm,
named Mumford, and Mumford is one of the sons of this rich family, but he is relegated to being like the driver for the family because he's high functioning. The thing that they trust him to do is work on the cars and drive the cars.
mhm,
And yeah, uh, they really do a good job of setting up how Blanche is able to pick up on all of these cues that something is going on. And yeah, it unfolds slowly. As I said,
mhm,
the mystery starts 2.5 hours in, and you really start to get a sense of what's going on another 2.5 hours in, so 5 hours in, and then the last 2 hours is really kind of like the climactic confrontation and everything else that goes along with it.
mhm. So
Um,
would you say it's more of like a character-driven mystery then, since the action isn't really present right away?
yes, yeah, yeah. It's especially focusing on Blanche and Mumford.
Okay.
Um, and the reason why it focuses so much on Mumford is Blanche's character really starts to like. At first, she doesn't understand Mumford, and like she doesn't even realize that he has a handicap,
Mhm,
and it like builds her understanding of Mumford, and then ultimately her appreciation and friendship,
okay.
um, which I really liked.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's tough to talk about mysteries without wanting to give everything away. Um, because yeah, the book, it does a great job of covering a lot of racial dynamics. It covers a lot of class dynamics. It talks a lot about sexism and how women, particularly women of color, are treated in society.
Mhm,
And one of the things that I would be remiss not to mention is the fact that this book was written in 1992.
mhm.
And if it wasn't for the fact that there are telephones with cords and certain other technological things, like all of the subject matter that this book covers,
Uh-huh.
talking about unarmed victims of police shootings, and because she dives into a lot of things that people of color deal with.
Mhm, and have been
And
dealing with for decades, centuries, yeah.
exactly, it's like if they were holding cell phones instead of corded telephones, you would think that the book was written last year.
Okay.
So especially with a lot of the stuff that they cover.
Yeah.
But
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, from race issues to Me Too,
Mhm.
it's all kind of covered in there. So yeah, it's the type of book that you could pick up today, and it's gonna feel just as relevant as it did in 1992 when it was released.
Okay. Yeah, and it looks like it's a whole series, and they all follow Blanche. So
Mhm,
I'm guessing you haven't read the rest of them, but I'm guessing probably learn more about her as we go along because that's kind of how those whole series revolving around a certain character go. I remember in middle school, I was really into Agatha Christie and followed a lot of the Miss Marple books, and so you kind of learned a little bit more about Miss Marple and her life as you went along. Though those are a little bit less character driven, so you didn't find out quite as much about her. It sounds like this, you find out a lot more about the characters and their personal lives, whereas a lot of Agatha Christie's, like, you delved right into the mystery,
mhm,
after, like, the first chapter. So,
yeah.
yeah, and it sounds like it's probably, in terms of subgenres, I would call it a cozy mystery. Would you say that, like, most of the violence and all that occur off stage?
Oh yeah, yeah. Other than the big climactic scene, the all the violence takes place not only off screen, but it's like somebody comes in and did you hear about what happened last night type of
Mhm.
thing, and
Gotcha.
so it's really
Is there any, like, sexual content, or is it pretty tame?
no, I mean there's references to sexual assault and things like that, but everything is
Mhm.
talked about from a perspective of this is what people are like, or these are the types of things that people do.
Okay. But
But
yeah,
there's
so it's
there's no
more off screen, it's not actually
yeah.
happening on screen. Okay. So yeah, that's like a feature of Cozy Mysteries. Another feature of Cozy Mysteries is that it takes place in, like, a small town, usually, and it sounds like, she starts out in a town and then goes out to the country, so that would fit. She is a amateur detective, she's not a
Yep.
detective by trade. Um
And at least the way they leave things at the end, she's not intending to become the next Jacques Clouseau or
or Miss Marple or
yeah.
any of those people. She's not intending to become the person who solves the mysteries all the time, but, I'm guessing because the series features her, she's always the one who solves the mysteries to some degree. Does she have any contacts, like, on the police force or anything that help her out with the mystery or no?
No, actually, so she's fleeing the police.
Yeah.
So go to the police at all. In fact, that is like a constant, like, what do I, the question gets asked, what do I do as a woman of color who is on that I feel like I am not going to be believed over the word of rich white folks.
Mhm,
Um, how do I navigate this mystery, particularly when I also am on the lam.
mhm,
And so there's like a really kind of they set up her mom as being this very kind of like judgy, um, respectability politics woman that is, judging her Blanche for all of her actions.
mhm,
And but she keeps calling her mom because she has to have a lifeline somewhere.
mhm,
And there's like this moment where Barbara Neely kind of explains that dynamic, but also how there are two sides to how people often have to live in order to survive.
mhm,
And the moment where her mom just kind of switches gears in order to protect her daughter, and that's when the mom reaches out to people to like make sure that there's a place for Blanche to go if she needs
okay.
to flee again.
Uh-huh.
There is a person that's asking around town to find out as much as they can about the family. So she's kind of got this like phone a friend, like the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, where
Yeah, so does she, confide in her mom what's going
yes,
on with the mystery? Okay.
yeah, and so she tells her mom the details, but leaves out certain key points because she doesn't want her mom to worry at first.
Okay.
But then the mom goes and talks to, the neighborhood know-it-all,
The
busybody
busybody, yeah.
that then comes and gathers all the information on the family and starts feeding information to the mom, and the mom calls to pass that information on to So there's like this constant like give and take where
Okay, so the
Blanche.
mom basically serves the role of what would have normally been, like, the police officer or, like, the
Exactly.
yeah, or the friend in the authorities. And then my final question, as to, because that's one of the typical things of a cozy mystery. My final question in terms of cozy mystery is, without giving anything away, so in cozies, the killers usually are not a psychopath or a serial killer, and they're
Mhm.
usually somebody who is taken in without violence and are usually somebody who the family knows and has, like, a grievance against the family that is often, like, something that's been generations in the making. Is that true for this book?
Um, Without violence, um,
Serial killer? Psychopath?
so so not not a serial killer.
Okay.
Well, no, because actually, it turns out that 3 people were killed. So I guess from what you think of as a serial killer versus somebody that kills multiple people to cover up their crimes.
Uh-huh.
Um, so yes, it's sort of ambiguously. This is just a person that thinks that they can get away with whatever they want because they've
Okay.
got money.
Okay.
And
Alright,
so,
that's we shouldn't give anything else away.
yes, you're right.
Alright.
um,
So if you like cozy mysteries, you should check out Blanche on the Lamb by Barbara Neely.
and
Um
would it qualify for somebody that's doing the Read Woke challenge?
Oh, yeah, totally. As it's, it would either qualify for the women's badge or it qualifies for both actually, and the, Black author badge. So you could mark it down for both, or you can do different books for each. But yeah, I've gotta log some in my Read Woke challenge on Beanstack.
Very good.
So do you think you'll ever pick up another cozy mystery, or do you think that this was pretty much it?
That's a good question. Um, I kind One of the things that even though I've never read, I shouldn't say never. I was just gonna say, I'm sure that I read like a Choose Your Own Adventure when I was a kid. That was a mystery. So I can't say that I've never read a mystery, but I kind of like the idea of mysteries.
Mhm.
And I think that reading mysteries is a it could, sharpen up some of my, because I pull everything back to role playing games, and so I think that pulling some of those elements into my games, I think would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And so reading another one that maybe falls more in my that might involve swords or lasers might be more my thing. But I also like when we watch movies, I really like noir a lot, and so but noir mysteries are their own whole separate subgenre. So
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different subgenres, there's, like, the ones where, they follow, like, recipes or the cats or, those I can't remember what that subgenre is called.
domestic.
Um, yes, the domestic mysteries. There's the thrillers that, are more, like, high action packed CIA agents coming in and rescuing people and solving a mystery together with, usually, like, a damsel in distress, but sometimes, it's the other way around and it's a woman saving a man or whatever, but yeah, there's all sorts of different subgenres of the mystery.
When you type in subgenres of mystery, the first article lists 12. But then when I looked at other articles, there were other ones that were not listed in those 12. So yeah.
Well, yeah, because more have, like, been invented over time, it's like, I remember around the time that the X-Files came out in the '90s, all of a sudden, a bunch of these mysteries came out that were, like took place in the American Southwest and involved things like indigenous folk tales and aliens and
Mhm.
things like that. So, like, weird mixing of mystery with sci-fi with, folk tales, and then ultimately it usually ended up being that, like, a human was responsible for things, but,
I
you
am
know
typing in cryptid mystery subgenre because I'm curious. Cryptofiction, 90 books, Goodreads.
there you go.
Something to explore.
Alright. So let's move on to trip hop.
Yeah, so I have talked about trip hop in a number of previous episodes, and I was hoping that Lisa would take a little time to explore this kind of it's kind of a small genre. I mean, like all genres, it exploded, but really, it kind of originated with three bands out of England, and so yeah, I wanted Lisa to explore that. So, what did you listen to, and what were your thoughts?
So I listened to Tricky's Mixed Race, and that came out in 2010. And I listened to Protection by Massive Attack, which came out in 1994. Because when I kind of mentioned them to Nick, Nick was like, the birth of trip hop was in the 90s, so I figured I'd get one from back in the 90s, and then I'd get something a little newer, and see, what the difference was between them. Nick listens to Portishead a lot at home, so I already was familiar with Portishead, and I did a little bit of reading about trip hop. Found out that, like he said, it originated in England. It originated in Bristol, and it is a combination of like electronica and hip hop, and R&B and kind of ambient. It draws in from a lot of different genres. And it was interesting listening to all the different artists because, like I said, I've listened to Portishead at home before, but I never really listened to Massive Attack or Tricky. I think I'd only heard a couple songs that Nick had played for me from Tricky before, and both albums are very different. Tricky was a lot more experimental and had a lot less of like the techno element to it. Massive Attack had more of a techno element to it, a little bit more electronic in sound, and I think I actually like the Tricky one more. I'm not a huge fan of electronic music. I like more like industrial music than like electronica, but they're kind of tied to each other.
Hmm.
And then neither of them, neither Massive Attack nor Tricky had the like Portishead has a very like ethereal component because the singer has this very like smoky, soft voice.
Hmm.
And I don't know if they use a theremin or what instrument they use, but they use an
They do
instrument
use
that
the theremin.
yeah, they use an instrument that makes a lot of, like, very spooky noises, and that's vastly different from these other 2. So, yeah, it was interesting listening to the different albums and getting a sense of what trip hop could encompass because up until recently, I basically was just like, Portishead is trip hop, and that was, like, the only band that I knew that was. But, yeah, just like, with hip hop or with other genres that I listen to regularly, it's like there are so many different interpretations of what hip hop is or what rock and roll is or what
Mhm.
punk rock is. I mean, there's just so many little subgenres within the genres, and it's interesting to see even within those subgenres how people differ from each other.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that those 3 bands, they all came up in the same scene at the same time, and they took the idea of taking, like, really slow hip hop beats
Mhm,
and layering, like, very, like, smooth at sometimes very smooth sounds over
mhm,
them, and, but took them in 3 different directions.
mhm.
And so they all were considered trip hop, but at the same time they all had their own unique thing about them.
Yeah, they all
And
sound so different. Yeah.
yeah, but the one thing that interesting about Massive Attack's Protection versus that later Tricky record, when you listen to older Tricky and Massive Attack sound more similar because Tricky was involved in Massive Attack in
Okay.
those early years, where people who are listening, where they might know Massive Attack from, is the opening song to the TV show House, the medical drama House, is a song called Teardrop from Massive Attack. And so that is probably the intersection where most people will have some sort of connection to trip hop, because the TV show House.
Well, I feel like a lot of people know who Portishead is, because when I mentioned Portishead, a lot of people have heard of them before, especially if they're around our age.
Mhm.
Because they've popped up here and there, and especially if you're somebody who has delved into alternative indie rock kind of music. Um, I think it's really interesting how different they are. I feel like Massive Attack sounds like it could be something that would be in a cyberpunk movie,
Mhm.
whereas I feel like Portishead would be something that if they were in a cyberpunk movie, they would be like the cabaret singer, in a smoky room, you
Yep.
know? So I guess say we were watching, Blade Runner, it would be like Massive Attack would be what was playing while Harrison Ford's walking around on the street, and I feel like Portishead would be what's playing when he goes into, like, the bar where all the replicants, is that what they were called?
Yeah,
I don't know what they were called, where they all were working. I don't really feel like Tricky would have fit into that, but the album that I listened to was from 2010, so, I don't know what early Tricky sounded like. The newer Tricky reminded me more of, like, the things that, like, Lupe Fiasco and Kanye West have done, but with less hip hop in 'em. Bringing in a lot of sampling, a lot of, like, jazzy kinda stuff and mixing it with hip hop beats, which I found
yeah,
interesting and I liked it a lot.
yeah, yeah. He definitely mixes things up a lot. And
Mhm.
just out of curiosity, I typed into the Google what soundtracks that Portishead have been on,
Mhm.
and Tank Girl, The Craft,
Okay,
um,
yes, The Craft was a
Mar
classic.
yeah, Mars Attacks, surprisingly.
What?
Yes, Mars Attacks. But, yeah, I mean, the amount of things that Portishead's music has been in is extensive,
Okay,
including an episode of The Handmaid's Tale.
okay.
Um, but yeah, all 3, Tricky, Massive Attack, and Portishead, I believe, were extensively in, a lot of those, like, young, hip movies, like, the equivalent of, oh, the one, Internet, 1990. Um, what
Johnny Mnemonic?
not Johnny Mnemonic, though Johnny Mnemonic would fit as well, but, Hackers,
Oh,
the
Hackers,
Hackers
okay.
soundtrack,
Okay,
which definitely has Sneaker Pimps, which is another, like, trip hop band that was, like, very adjacent to that scene.
okay.
Um, but, yeah, it's an interesting genre, and it's interesting to see how it's evolved, because one of the things that I listen to while I'm writing,
Mhm.
I stumbled upon there are lo-fi trip hop mixes on YouTube for doing homework.
Huh,
And so there's no vocals, and it's just like smooth trip hop beats, and you just like listen to it for 2 hours straight, so that you can listen to music without
the
activating the
interruption.
parts of your
Yeah,
brain that interrupt.
yeah, yeah, 'cause, yeah, language oftentimes will interrupt your thoughts. But yeah, very cool. Alright, so that is our episode for this week. Oh,
Wait, you
what?
should tell people about what trip hop stuff is available in the catalog.
There's a lot of trip hop stuff available in the catalog. So I actually got the Tricky and the Massive Attack. Got them both on CD from the library. I ended up having to request them from other libraries, but there were several Tricky CDs. There were several Massive Attack CDs. I know we have Portishead. Um, I'm sure if you looked up, you could probably find Sneaker Pimps. I don't know who else the trip hop bands are. I went with
Yeah,
the top three because you were like, go with the OGs, and so I was like, all right, I'll
yep,
go with the top three.
indeed. You can't miss with the classics. And yeah, you can also get from County Cat the Saint soundtrack, which has a bunch of stuff that would fall under that category.
Really?
Yeah,
That Val Kilmer movie?
yeah, the Val Kilmer movie, and
Okay.
it's got a couple of Sneaker Pimps, but also a bunch of great mid '90s electronica, like the Chemical Brothers, Underworld, Moby, um, Orbital, all stuff that I listened to extensively
Okay.
in the mid '90s, and you never know, you might get genre dived on those in the future.
Well, I know I watched that movie a lot when I was in high school because I used to have a crush on Val Kilmer.
Yep.
I don't really remember the music, I just remember Val Kilmer.
Maybe the music will bring back those feelings. So, would you explore more trip hop in the future?
Yeah, I think
As a genre, is it something you're like, yeah, I kind of like this, or is it, yeah, I can take it or leave it?
I think it's like I can take it or leave it. I enjoyed some of it a lot. It doesn't have the same effect for me that, like, hip hop does.
Mm,
Um, I tend to be somebody who likes music that has more of, like, a message to it, and a lot of trip hop is, at least what I've listened to so far, didn't really have a message. It's just kinda like music and some samples mixed in and maybe some ethereal singing, but I can't even really tell what she's saying, so
Yeah.
and a lot of it doesn't sound, like a lot of it sounds like it's, about romance or things like that, which I don't mind songs like that, but yeah, it's just it's not that I don't like it, it wasn't my favorite.
Yeah. Of the 3, it's interesting that you thought the Tricky CD was interesting, because if you were to listen to early Tricky, it's a mix of songs about romance and relationships, and then also songs that have political subtext.
Okay,
Tricky even covers, on their first record, covers a Public Enemy song.
very cool. Well,
Yeah.
maybe I have to check out some early Tricky.
Yeah.
Like a lot of things with music, it's just finding the right artists for you, so
Yep. This is true.
all right. Okay. Well, as always, thank you for tuning in. You can find us on Podbean, Spotify, or iTunes. Until next time, thanks for listening and be well. The Shoreward Stacks is produced and recorded by Lisa Quintero and Nick Barron for the Shoreward Public Library. Music for the show is by Kevin MacLeod. The song is called Ice Flow and can be found at incompetech.com.